The morning sun barely touched the top of the pine trees when Thomas McKenna woke up on his old wooden bed. He did not wake up because he wanted to. His chest hurt again. The pain felt like someone was sitting on him, making it hard to breathe. Thomas sat up slowly and put his feet on the cold floor. His cabin had no heat except for the wood stove in the main room. Thomas was 67 years old. He lived alone on the mountain in Montana. He had been alone for 20 years. His cabin sat far from any road. The nearest person lived 15 miles away down the mountain. Thomas liked it that way. He did not want to see people. He did not want people to see him. But now, Thomas was sick. Very sick. His heart did not work right anymore. The doctor in town had told him this 2 years ago when he last went down the mountain. The doctor said his heart was weak. He also had sugar diabetes. The doctor gave him pills and said he needed to come back every few months. Thomas never went back. He did not like doctors. He did not like town. He did not like being around people who asked questions. Thomas got dressed in the same clothes he wore every day. Old blue jeans with holes in the knees. A red flannel shirt that used to belong to someone else. Thick wool socks and heavy boots. He walked to his small kitchen and looked at the shelves. He had 3 cans of beans left, half a bag of rice, some coffee. Not much else. Winter was coming soon. He could see snow on the mountaintops already. Every morning, Thomas did the same things. He made coffee in an old metal pot. He ate whatever food he had. Then he went outside to chop wood. He needed lots of wood to keep warm when the snow came, but chopping wood was getting harder. His arms felt weak. His chest hurt more each day. Sometimes he had to stop and sit down because he could not breathe. Thomas picked up his axe and walked outside. The air was cold and clean. He loved the smell of the pine trees. He loved the quiet. No cars, no voices, no noise except for birds and wind in the trees. This mountain had been his home for 20 years. Before that, he lived in town. He had a wife named Mary and a little girl named Susan. They lived in a small house with a white fence. Thomas worked cutting down trees for the lumber company. Then one day, everything changed. Mary and Susan went to the store to buy food. A drunk driver hit their car. They both died. Thomas was at work when it happened. He came home and found police cars in his driveway. A policeman told him the news. Thomas felt like his heart stopped beating that day. Nothing was ever the same. After the funeral, Thomas could not stand being in town. Everything reminded him of Mary and Susan. The house felt empty and cold. People tried to help him. They brought food. They said nice things. But Thomas did not want their help. He did not want to talk about his feelings. He wanted to be left alone. So Thomas sold his house and bought this cabin on the mountain. He brought his truck, some tools, and a few clothes. He thought he would stay for a few months until he felt better. But months turned into years. Years turned into 20 years. Thomas never went back to his old life. He became a mountain man, a hermit, someone who lived apart from the world. Now Thomas stood in front of a pile of wood he needed to cut. He raised the axe over his head. His chest started hurting again. The axe felt so heavy. Thomas swung it down on the log. The wood split in 2. He picked up the axe again. This time the pain in his chest was worse. Thomas dropped the axe and sat down on a log. He put his hand on his chest and tried to breathe slowly. Thomas knew he was dying. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. His body was wearing out like an old truck. Parts were breaking down. The engine was running rough. Soon it would stop working completely. What would happen then? Thomas thought about this every day now. In winter, no one came up the mountain. The road was blocked with snow. If he died, no one would find him until spring. Maybe not even then. The bears might drag his body away, or the snow might cover his cabin completely. Thomas did not care much about dying. He had been ready to die for 20 years. Life without Mary and Susan was just going through the motions, getting up, eating, sleeping, repeat. He was tired of being alone, tired of the pain in his chest, tired of having no reason to keep going. But lately Thomas had been thinking about other things too. He thought about Mary and what she would say if she could see him now. She always said he was too stubborn, too proud to ask for help. She was right. Even when he was married, Thomas liked to do things his own way. He fixed his own truck. He built their deck by himself. He never asked anyone for anything. Mary used to laugh at him. She would say, "Thomas McKenna, you would rather die than ask someone to help you change a light bulb." She was joking then. Now it might be true. Thomas was going to die rather than ask for help. He could drive down the mountain. He could see the doctor. He could take his medicine every day like he was supposed to. But he was too stubborn, too set in his ways. Thomas picked up the axe again. He cut 3 more pieces of wood before the pain got too bad. Then he sat down again and looked at the pile. He needed 10 times more wood to make it through winter. At this rate, he would never finish. Maybe that was okay. Maybe this was how it was supposed to end. Thomas McKenna, the hermit of the mountain, would die chopping wood alone in the forest. As Thomas sat there, he heard a sound he did not hear very often. A truck engine coming up the mountain road. Thomas frowned. No one ever came here except the mail carrier once a month. But the mail carrier had come just 2 weeks ago. Thomas stood up and walked toward his cabin. The truck was getting closer. Soon he could see it through the trees. It was the sheriff's white truck with the star on the side. Thomas felt worried. Why would the sheriff come all the way up here? Maybe someone had died, or maybe there was trouble in town. The sheriff's truck stopped in front of Thomas's cabin. A man in a brown uniform got out. Thomas recognized him. Sheriff Johnson. He was a good man, not the type to bother people without a good reason. "Morning, Thomas," Sheriff Johnson said. He looked serious. "Morning, Sheriff," Thomas replied. "What brings you up the mountain?" Sheriff Johnson reached into his truck and pulled out a large envelope. It was yellow and thick, the kind that meant important papers. "Got something for you, Thomas. Came to the office yesterday. Has to be delivered in person. It is about your family." Thomas felt confused. He had no family. Mary and Susan were dead. His parents died years ago. He had no brothers or sisters, at least none that talked to him. "My family?" Thomas asked. "Says here it is from a lawyer in Nebraska, about your cousin Clara." Thomas had not heard that name in over 20 years. Clara was his cousin on his father's side. They grew up together when they were kids, but they lost touch when they became adults. Thomas did not even know if she was still alive. "What about Clara?" Thomas asked. Sheriff Johnson handed him the envelope. "I think you better read this yourself, Thomas." "And Thomas?" The sheriff paused. "You might want to sit down first." Thomas took the yellow envelope with shaking hands. His name was written on the front in black ink. Thomas McKenna. Below that was his address. McKenna Cabin, Mountain Road, Glacier County, Montana. Someone had found him way up here on the mountain. That was not easy to do. Sheriff Johnson stood quietly while Thomas looked at the envelope. The return address said, Peterson and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Norfolk, Nebraska. Thomas had never been to Nebraska. He did not know any lawyers. Why would a lawyer be sending him letters? "Take your time, Thomas," Sheriff Johnson said. "I will wait." Thomas walked to his cabin door and sat down on the wooden step. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside were 3 pages of white paper covered with small black words. The first page had a letterhead at the top, Peterson and Associates. Below that was a date from 2 weeks ago. Thomas began to read. The words were hard to understand. Lawyers always wrote in a way that made simple things sound complicated, but as Thomas read, he began to understand what the letter was telling him. His chest started to hurt again, but not from his heart problem. This was a different kind of pain. Clara McKenna Patterson was dead. Thomas read the sentence 3 times to make sure he understood it right. His cousin Clara had died in a farming accident 3 weeks ago. She was only 52 years old. The letter said she was driving a tractor when it rolled over on a hill. She died instantly. But that was not the biggest shock. Thomas kept reading. Clara had been married to a man named Robert Patterson. Robert died 2 years ago from cancer. Clara and Robert had 3 children together: Emma Patterson, age 16, Jake Patterson, age 12, Sophie Patterson, age 7. Thomas stopped reading and looked up at Sheriff Johnson. "Clara's dead," he said. "I am sorry, Thomas," the sheriff replied. "Were you close?" Thomas shook his head. "We were kids together, but I have not talked to her in 25 years, maybe more." Thomas looked back at the letter. The next part made him feel dizzy. Clara had made a will before she died. In that will, she named Thomas McKenna as the guardian of her 3 children. She also left him her farm in Norfolk, Nebraska. 160 acres of corn and wheat fields, a farmhouse, a barn, all the equipment. Why would Clara do this? Thomas had not seen her since they were young adults. He barely remembered what she looked like. Brown hair like his, blue eyes. She was always laughing about something, but that was so long ago. Why would she trust him with her children? Thomas read further. The letter explained that Clara had very few relatives. Her parents were dead. She had no brothers or sisters. Robert's family lived far away and could not take the children. Clara had written in her will that Thomas was a good man who would protect the children and teach them to be strong. She remembered him as someone who kept his word and worked hard. The children were currently staying with a foster family in Norfolk. But it was only temporary. The state of Nebraska needed to know within 30 days if Thomas would accept guardianship. If he said no, the children would be put up for adoption. The letter said it was hard to find families who wanted to adopt 3 children together. They would probably be split up and sent to different homes. Thomas felt sick to his stomach. 3 children he had never met were depending on him. A 16-year-old girl, a 12-year-old boy, a 7-year-old little girl. They had already lost both parents. Now they might lose each other too. "Bad news?" Sheriff Johnson asked. "I do not know," Thomas said. "Maybe. Clara left me her farm and her 3 kids. Sheriff Johnson whistled low. "3 kids? You?" Thomas knew what the sheriff was thinking. Thomas McKenna was a hermit who lived alone on a mountain. He had not talked to a child in 20 years. He barely talked to adults. How could he take care of 3 children? "The lawyer wants me to call him," Thomas said, still reading the letter. "There are papers to sign, things to decide." The letter included a phone number and an address. There was also a second page with information about the children. Emma was a good student who helped take care of her younger siblings. Jake liked to work on farm equipment and was good with his hands. Sophie was shy but sweet. She had been very close to her mother. The third page was about the farm. It was in debt. Clara had been struggling to pay the bills since her husband died. The bank was threatening to take the farm away if the payments were not made soon. But if someone could get the farm running well again, it could make enough money to support a family. Thomas finished reading and folded the papers. His mind was spinning with thoughts and questions. What did he know about raising children? Nothing. What did he know about farming? A little bit. He had grown up on his grandfather's farm before his family moved to Montana. But that was 50 years ago. Sheriff Johnson sat down next to Thomas on the step. "What are you thinking?" "I am thinking those kids deserve better than me," Thomas said. "Maybe," Sheriff Johnson replied. "But maybe you deserve better than this." He pointed at the empty mountain around them. "You have been up here alone for 20 years, Thomas. That is long enough to mourn." Thomas looked at the sheriff with surprise. No one had ever talked to him about Mary and Susan. No one dared. Sheriff Johnson continued. "I knew Mary. She was a good woman, kind to everyone. You think she would want you to die alone up here? You think she would want you to let those kids get split up when you could help them?" Thomas felt angry. "You do not know what Mary would want." "You are right, I do not," Sheriff Johnson said calmly. "But I know what any decent person would want. Those kids need help. You are all they have got." Thomas stood up and walked away from the sheriff. He needed to think. This was too much to understand all at once. Yesterday his biggest problem was chopping enough wood for winter. Now 3 children he had never met were counting on him to save them. Thomas thought about Emma, the 16-year-old. She was the same age Susan would have been if she had lived. Thomas tried to imagine what Susan would look like now. Would she have Mary's smile? Would she be smart like her mother? Thomas would never know. But Emma Patterson was real. She was alive. She needed help. So did Jake and little Sophie. They were probably scared and confused. They did not understand why their mother had to die. Thomas understood that feeling very well. Sheriff Johnson walked over to Thomas. "The lawyer will need an answer soon. Those kids cannot wait forever." Thomas nodded. "I know." "There is something else, Thomas. You are sick. Everyone in town knows it. If you stay up here alone this winter, you might not make it to spring. But if you go to Nebraska, you could see a doctor, take your medicine, maybe get better." Thomas had thought about this too. If he died, what good would that do the children? But if he lived, maybe he could help them. Maybe they could help each other. "I need to think," Thomas said. "How long?" Sheriff Johnson asked. "Give me until tomorrow. I will call the lawyer then." "Sheriff," Johnson nodded. "I will come back tomorrow afternoon. You can give me your answer then." After the sheriff left, Thomas sat alone in his cabin. The letter was on his small wooden table. He read it again and again. 3 children, Emma, Jake, and Sophie. Their mother had trusted him to take care of them. But why? Thomas tried to remember. Clara as a child. She was 2 years younger than him. They spent summers together on their grandfather's farm. Clara was always getting into trouble, climbing trees, chasing chickens, swimming in the pond when she was not supposed to. But she was also kind. When Thomas got scared during thunderstorms, Clara would sit with him until the storm passed. Maybe that was why Clara chose him. She remembered that he had been kind to her when they were children. She hoped he would be kind to her children now. Thomas looked around his cabin. 1 room, 1 bed, no telephone, no television, no running water. This was no place for children. If he said yes to this crazy plan, everything would have to change. He would have to leave his mountain. He would have to live around people again. He would have to learn how to be responsible for someone besides himself. The thought scared him, more than dying alone. Thomas did not sleep that night. He sat at his small table and looked at the letter from the lawyer over and over. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw faces. Mary's face. Susan's face. And now 3 faces he had never seen before. Emma, Jake, and Sophie Patterson, children who needed him. When the sun came up, Thomas knew what he had to do. He could not let those kids get split up. He could not let them go to strangers when family was available. Even if that family was a sick old hermit who did not know anything about raising children. Thomas spent the morning getting ready. He packed his few good clothes in an old suitcase. He put his important papers in a metal box. Birth certificate, marriage certificate, the deed to his cabin. He also packed the only pictures he had of Mary and Susan. 3 small photographs, in wooden frames. When Sheriff Johnson arrived that afternoon, Thomas was waiting outside with his suitcase and the metal box. "I am going to Nebraska," Thomas said. Sheriff Johnson smiled. "I thought you might. Those kids are lucky to have you." "I hope you are right," Thomas replied. But he did not feel lucky. He felt scared. The trip to Nebraska was the hardest thing Thomas had done in 20 years. He drove his old pickup truck down the mountain road for the first time in 2 years. When he got to the main highway, the noise hit him like a punch. Cars and trucks rushing past, horns honking, radios playing. After 20 years of mountain, quiet. It was too much. Thomas had to stop at a gas station after 1 hour of driving. His chest was hurting again. The stress of being around people was making his heart work too hard. He bought gas and tried to eat a sandwich, but his stomach felt sick. An old woman at the next table stared at him. Thomas realized he looked strange. His hair was long and gray. His beard was wild. His clothes smelled like wood smoke. He looked like exactly what he was, a mountain man who did not belong in civilization. The drive to Nebraska took 2 days. Thomas had to stop many times to rest. He stayed in a cheap motel the first night and barely slept. The bed was too soft. The room was too warm. There were too many sounds. Cars on the highway, people in other rooms, air conditioning humming. Thomas lay awake thinking about what he was doing. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe he should turn around and go back to his mountain, but every time he thought about quitting, he remembered the letter. 3 children with no one else to help them. A 16-year-old girl trying to take care of her younger brother and sister. Thomas knew what it felt like to lose family. He would not wish that pain on anyone. On the second day, Thomas reached Norfolk, Nebraska. It was a small farming town with wide streets and old buildings. Not as big as some places, but much bigger than anything Thomas was used to. He followed the directions the lawyer had given him and found the office of Peterson and Associates. The law office was in an old brick building downtown. Thomas parked his truck and sat for a few minutes trying to calm down. His chest was hurting again. His hands were shaking. He did not want to go inside, but he had to. Those children were counting on him. Mr. Peterson was a thin man with gray hair and kind eyes. He seemed surprised when he saw Thomas. Maybe he was expecting someone who looked more normal, someone who could actually take care of children. "Mr. McKenna," the lawyer said, shaking Thomas's hand. "Thank you for coming. I know this must be difficult." Thomas nodded but did not say much. Mr. Peterson led him to a small office with papers everywhere. There were photographs on the desk. Thomas could see they were pictures of the children, his children now, if he signed the papers. "Before we begin," Mr. Peterson said, "I should tell you about Clara. She was a remarkable woman. After her husband died, she kept that farm running by herself while raising 3 children. It was not easy, but she never complained. The children adore her memory." Thomas looked at the photographs again. Emma had brown hair like Clara used to have. She was pretty but looked serious. Too serious for a 16-year-old. Jake had lighter hair and was grinning at the camera. He looked like trouble, but good trouble. Sophie was tiny with blonde curls and big blue eyes. She looked scared even in the photograph. "The children know about you," Mr. Peterson continued. Clara told them stories about her cousin Thomas who lived on a mountain. They know their mother chose you to take care of them. But they are frightened. They have lost so much already. The lawyer explained the legal papers Thomas needed to sign. Guardianship documents, papers for the farm, bank information. It was all very complicated, but Mr. Peterson was patient. He explained everything twice to make sure Thomas understood. "There is one more thing," Mr. Peterson said. "The farm is in debt. About $50,000. Clara was behind on payments to the bank and several suppliers. If you cannot bring the payments current within 6 months, the bank will foreclose. You and the children would lose everything." Thomas felt his heart sink. $50,000 might as well be $50 million. He had maybe $3,000 in his savings account. How could he possibly save the farm? However, the lawyer continued, the farm itself is worth much more than the debt. If you can get it running properly again, it will make enough money to pay the bills and support the family. Clara was a good farmer, but she was trying to do too much by herself. After signing all the papers, it was time to meet the children. They were staying with a foster family named the Johnsons. Not the same Johnson as the sheriff back home, but a different family. Bob and Linda Johnson had been taking care of Emma, Jake and Sophie for 3 weeks. The Johnson house was small but neat. There were toys in the yard and flowers in the garden. It looked like a happy place. Thomas wondered if the children would want to leave here to go with a stranger like him. Mrs. Johnson answered the door. She was a round, cheerful woman with gray hair. "You must be Mr. McKenna," she said. "Please come in. The children are waiting in the living room." Thomas followed her inside. The house smelled like cookies and cleaning soap. Very different from his cabin, which smelled like wood smoke and leather. In the living room, 3 children sat on a brown couch. They looked up when Thomas walked in, and nobody said anything for a long moment. Emma was tall for 16. She had her mother's serious eyes and was holding Sophie's hand. Jake sat between his sisters, looking curious but cautious. Sophie was smaller than Thomas expected. She pressed close to Emma and stared at Thomas with wide eyes. "Children," Mrs. Johnson said gently, "this is your cousin Thomas. He has come a very long way to meet you." Thomas stood awkwardly in the doorway. He did not know what to say. How do you talk to children you have never met? How do you tell them you want to take care of them when you have no idea how? Finally, Emma spoke. "Are you really going to take us to live on a farm?" Her voice was quiet but strong. "Yes," Thomas said, "if you want to come with me." "We do not have a choice, do we?" Emma asked. It was not mean, just honest. She was right. The children did not have many options. "You always have a choice," Thomas replied. "I'm not going to force you to do anything." Jake looked at Thomas curiously. "Mom said you live on a mountain by yourself. Why do you want kids all of a sudden?" Thomas thought about the question. It was a fair one. "I do not know if I want kids," he said honestly. "But I know you need family. And I am family, even if we do not know each other yet." Sophie had not said anything. She just stared at Thomas with those big blue eyes. Finally, she whispered something to Emma. Emma smiled for the first time. "Sophie wants to know if you have any animals on your farm." Thomas looked at the little girl. "I do not have the farm yet," he said. "That was your mother's farm. If we go there together, it will be our farm. And yes, there are animals. Chickens and cows and maybe some horses." Sophie's eyes got bigger. "Horses?" she whispered. "Maybe," Thomas said. He was already making promises he might not be able to keep. Mrs. Johnson served dinner, and they all sat around a small table. Thomas was not used to eating with other people. At home, he ate standing up or sitting alone at his wooden table. Here, everyone talked while they ate. Emma asked about the farm. Jake wanted to know about tractors and trucks. Sophie mostly stayed, quiet but listened to everything. After dinner, Thomas sat with the children in the living room. The television was on, but no one was really watching it. "When would we leave?" Emma asked. "Tomorrow, if you are ready," Thomas said. "The lawyer said we can stay at your mother's house while we figure everything out." Emma nodded. "We have been packing our things. We do not have much." Thomas looked at these three children who would soon be his responsibility. Emma, trying to be grown up and take care of everyone. Jake, curious and brave but still just a boy. Sophie, so small and quiet, still missing her mother terribly. "I want you to know something," Thomas said. "I have never taken care of children before. I will probably make mistakes, but I promise I will do my best to keep you safe and together." Emma looked at him seriously. "That is all Mom ever asked for. Just do your best." That night, Thomas stayed in a motel room near the Johnson house. He lay in bed thinking about what would happen tomorrow. He would drive 3 grieving children to a farm he had never seen. He would try to save a business he did not understand. He would try to be a father when he could barely remember how to be a person. But for the first time in 20 years, Thomas had a reason to get up in the morning. 3 reasons, actually. The next morning came too soon. Thomas picked up the children at the Johnson house at 9 o'clock. They each had 1 suitcase and a small bag of personal things. Emma carried a photograph of their parents. Jake had a toolbox that used to belong to his father. Sophie clutched a stuffed rabbit that was missing 1 ear. "Ready?" Thomas asked, though he was not ready himself. The children nodded and climbed into his old pickup truck. Emma sat in the front seat next to Thomas. Jake and Sophie squeezed together, in the back. The truck was not made for passengers. It smelled like oil and hay and had tears in the seats. Thomas felt embarrassed. These children had been through enough without riding in a broken-down truck. Clara's farm was 15 miles outside of town. They drove through flat fields of corn and wheat that stretched to the horizon. The land was so different from Thomas's. Mountain, no trees, no hills, just endless sky and farmland. "There it is," Emma said quietly as they turned down a dirt road. Thomas saw the farmhouse first. It was white with a green roof and a wide front porch. Not fancy, but solid and welcoming. Behind the house was a red barn that needed paint. There were several other buildings scattered around the property. Chicken coops, equipment sheds, a grain silo. Thomas parked the truck in front of the house. Everyone sat quietly for a moment, looking at what would be their new home. For the children, it was the place they had lived with their mother. For Thomas, it was completely foreign. Emma got out first. "I have the key," she said. Her voice was steady, but Thomas could see her hands shaking. The inside of the house was clean but felt empty. Mrs. Johnson had explained that neighbors had come after Clara's funeral to pack away personal things and clean up. The furniture was still there, a brown couch and chairs in the living room, a wooden table in the kitchen, beds in the 3 bedrooms upstairs. But it did not feel like a home anymore. It felt like a place where people used to live. Sophie ran to the kitchen and opened a cabinet. "Mom's coffee cups are gone," she said sadly. Emma put her arm around her little sister. "Mrs. Henderson packed them away for us. We can get them back when we are ready." Thomas walked through the house, trying to understand what he had gotten himself into. The kitchen had appliances he did not recognize: a dishwasher, a microwave, an electric stove. His cabin had none of these things. How was he supposed to cook for children when he barely knew how to cook for himself? Jake was more interested in what was outside. "Can we look at the barn?" he asked. They all walked to the big red barn together. Inside were farm machines that Thomas recognized from his grandfather's farm 50 years ago. A tractor that looked like it needed work, a combine harvester for cutting grain, plows and cultivators and other equipment. "Dad taught me how to drive the tractor," Jake said proudly. "I am too young to do it legally, but I know how." Thomas looked at the 12-year-old boy. Jake was small for his age, but his eyes were bright with interest. "Your father let you drive?" "Just in the fields," Emma said quickly. Mom did not like it, but Dad said Jake had natural talent with machines. Thomas walked around the tractor. It was an old model, maybe 20 years old. The paint was faded and there were rust spots, but the engine looked solid. "Does it run?" "Sometimes," Jake said. "It has been having problems lately. Mom could not afford to get it fixed." This was just the beginning of the problems Thomas would discover. Over the next few days, he learned how much trouble the farm was really in. The bank letters were stacked on Clara's desk, bills that had not been paid, equipment that was breaking down, fields that needed to be harvested before the weather turned bad. But first, they had to learn how to live together. The first night was hard for everyone. Thomas tried to cook dinner, but he burned the potatoes and the chicken was too dry. Emma finally took over and made sandwiches for everyone. Thomas felt useless. These children needed someone who could take care of them, not someone they had to take care of. "It is okay," Emma said when she saw his embarrassed face. "I have been doing the cooking since Dad died. I do not mind." But Thomas did mind. Emma was 16 years old. She should be worried about school and friends, not cooking dinner and taking care of her family. That was supposed to be his job now. Bedtime was even harder. Sophie cried for her mother and would not go to sleep. Jake kept asking questions about what would happen to them. Emma tried to comfort everyone while dealing with her own sadness. Thomas stood in the hallway listening to the sounds of a family in pain. He did not know what to do. On the mountain, when he felt sad, he could chop wood or walk in the forest until he felt better. But these children needed more than that. They needed comfort and security and love. Things Thomas had forgotten how to give. The next morning brought new challenges. Emma had to register for the local high school. Jake needed to start 7th grade. Sophie was supposed to begin 2nd grade. Thomas had never dealt with schools or teachers or any of the things parents had to do. At Norfolk High School, the principal was a kind woman named Mrs. Garcia. She looked at Thomas with concern when he brought Emma to register. "Are you Emma's father?" Mrs. Garcia asked. "I am her guardian," Thomas said. The word felt strange in his mouth. Mrs. Garcia looked at Emma. "How are you doing, honey? This must be very hard." Emma straightened her shoulders. "I am fine. I just want to finish school." Thomas could see that Emma was not fine. None of them were fine. But Emma was trying to be strong for everyone else. just like her mother had probably done. The paperwork for school was complicated. Thomas had to show the guardianship documents and prove where they lived and fill out forms about emergency contacts. He did not know answers to basic questions. What was Emma's favorite subject? Did she play any sports? What were her plans after graduation? Thomas realized he knew almost nothing about these children he was supposed to raise. Jake's school registration was easier because he was more talkative. He told everyone who would listen about the farm and the tractor, and how he was going to help save their home. His enthusiasm was infectious, but Thomas worried that the boy was too optimistic. Saving the farm would not be easy. Sophie's registration was the hardest. She clung to Emma and would not talk to the teachers. When they finally got her settled in her classroom, she started crying and had to be taken to the nurse's office. "She has been like this since Mom died," Emma explained to the teacher. "She just needs time." But Thomas wondered if time would be enough. How do you help a 7-year-old understand that her mother is never coming back? Thomas still did not understand it himself, even after 20 years. That afternoon, Thomas sat at Clara's kitchen table with a pile of bills and bank statements. The situation was worse than the lawyer had said. They owed money to everyone. The seed company, the fertilizer supplier, the equipment repair shop, the bank that held the mortgage. Emma found him there when she got home from school. "How bad is it?" she asked. Thomas looked at her. She was only 16, but she had been dealing with adult problems for years. She deserved an honest answer. "Pretty bad," Thomas said. "We need to harvest the crops and sell them to have any chance of paying the bills. But some of the equipment is broken, and I do not know enough about farming to do it right." Emma sat down across from him. "I know some things, and Jake knows about the machines. And there are neighbors who might help if we ask." Thomas felt doubtful. "Why would neighbors help us? They do not know me." "They knew Mom," Emma said simply. "She helped everyone when they needed it. People remember that." That evening, their first visitor proved Emma right. A man named Frank Henderson knocked on their door just as they were finishing dinner. He was about Thomas's age, with calloused hands and sun-weathered skin. "I am your neighbor from down the road," Frank said. "I wanted to come by and see how you folks are settling in." Frank had known Clara for 15 years. He explained that the farming community was small and people looked out for each other. He offered to help Thomas learn what he needed to know about running the farm. "Clara was good people," Frank said. "These kids deserve a chance to keep their home." After Frank left, Thomas felt a tiny bit of hope. Maybe they could make this work. Maybe neighbors would help. Maybe Jake really did have talent with machines. Maybe Emma's strength and determination would be enough to hold them together while Thomas figured out how to be a father. But that night, lying in Clara's guest room bed, Thomas still felt overwhelmed. Every day brought new problems he did not know how to solve. The children needed so much from him: guidance, security, love. And Thomas felt empty, like a well that had gone dry 20 years ago. From the room next door, he could hear Sophie crying softly for her mother. Thomas got up and stood outside her door, wanting to help but not knowing how. Finally, he heard Emma's voice, gentle and soothing, singing a lullaby until Sophie fell asleep. Thomas went back to bed thinking that maybe Emma would have been better off taking care of her siblings by herself. What could a broken-down hermit possibly teach these children about life? But in the morning, when Jake asked him to look at the tractor engine, Thomas found something he could do. The boy was right about having talent with machines. Together, they spent 2 hours figuring out why the tractor would not start properly. It felt good to work with his hands again. It felt good to teach Jake something useful. 3 weeks had passed since Thomas and the children moved to the farm. Each day was a little easier than the one before, but they were all still learning how to be a family. The first real breakthrough came with Sophie. She had been the hardest to reach. At school, she barely spoke to anyone. At home, she stayed close to Emma and avoided Thomas. She still cried for her mother every night, and nothing anyone said seemed to help. Thomas understood Sophie's sadness better than the others. He remembered what it felt like to lose the person you loved most in the world. The difference was that Sophie was only 7 years old. She did not have 20 years of life experience to help her cope. One evening, Thomas was sitting on the front porch fixing a broken fence post. The sun was setting behind the barn and the air was getting cool. Sophie came outside and sat on the porch steps, not saying anything. She just watched Thomas work with his hands. "What are you making?" she finally asked. It was the first time she had spoken directly to him. "I am not making anything," Thomas said. "I am fixing something that was broken." Sophie thought about this. "Can you fix anything that is broken?" Thomas stopped working and looked at the little girl. Her blonde curls caught the last light of the sun, and her blue eyes were serious. "Some things," he said carefully, "but not everything." "Can you fix hearts that are broken?" Sophie asked. The question hit Thomas like a physical blow. He set down his tools and moved closer to Sophie. "I do not know," he said honestly. "My heart has been broken for a very long time. I have not figured out how to fix it yet." Sophie nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. "Maybe we can learn together," she said. That weekend, Thomas decided to try something. He had noticed that Sophie liked to watch him work with wood. Back on his mountain, Thomas had carved small animals and figures to pass the time during long winter nights. He thought maybe Sophie would like to have something special of her own. Thomas found some soft pine wood in the barn and began carving a small rabbit. Not just any rabbit, but one that looked like Sophie's stuffed animal. He worked carefully, making sure the ears were the right shape and the face was gentle and kind. When he finished, Thomas found Sophie in her room, reading a book with Emma. "I made something for you," Thomas said, holding out the wooden rabbit. Sophie's eyes went wide. She took the carving and turned it over in her small hands. "It looks just like Bunny," she whispered. Bunny was her stuffed animal. "Now you have 2 rabbits," Thomas said. "One for sleeping and one for keeping." Sophie jumped up and hugged Thomas around the waist. It was the first time she had touched him willingly. "Thank you, Pa," she said. The word Pa hung in the air. Sophie had called him Pa without thinking about it. Emma and Jake heard it too. Nobody said anything, but something had changed in that moment. They were becoming a real family. Jake's breakthrough came a few days later. The boy had been working on the tractor engine every day after school. He was determined to get it running properly before harvest time. Thomas helped when he could, but Jake seemed to understand the machine better than anyone. The problem was that Jake was impatient. He wanted to fix everything at once instead of taking it step by step. This led to mistakes and frustration. One afternoon, Jake tried to remove a stuck bolt and stripped the threads. When he realized what he had done, he threw his wrench across the barn and started crying. "I ruined it," Jake shouted. "Now we will never get it fixed." Thomas walked over and picked up the wrench. "Let me see," he said calmly. Jake wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "I am sorry. I know we do not have money to fix my mistakes." Thomas examined the bolt. It was damaged but not beyond repair. "This can be fixed," he said. "But first, let me tell you something about machines." Thomas sat down on an overturned bucket and motioned for Jake to sit beside him. "Your father was right. You do have natural talent with engines, but talent is not enough. You also need patience." "I am trying to be patient," Jake said. "I know, you are. But there is a difference between being patient and being in a hurry to be patient." Thomas smiled at the confused look on Jake's face. "When I was your age, I wanted to fix everything fast too. My grandfather taught me that machines have their own time. You cannot force them. You have to listen to what they are telling you." Thomas showed Jake how to use a thread chaser to repair the damaged bolt. It was slow, careful work that required attention to detail. Jake watched closely and asked good questions. "The most important thing about working with machines," Thomas said as they worked, "is that every mistake teaches you something. This bolt will be stronger now than it was before, because we took the time to fix it right. When they finally got the tractor running smoothly a week later, Jake was prouder of that accomplishment than anything he had ever done. More importantly, he had learned something about patience and persistence that would serve him well in life. Emma's breakthrough was different. She had been trying so hard to take care of everyone that she had forgotten how to be a teenager. She got up early to make breakfast. She helped Sophie with homework. She did laundry and cleaning without being asked. She was trying to be the mother the family had lost. Thomas noticed that Emma never asked for anything for herself. She never complained when she had extra work. She never talked about friends or activities at school. She was carrying the weight of the whole family on her shoulders. One evening, Thomas found Emma crying quietly in the kitchen while she washed dishes. She tried to hide it when he came in, but her eyes were red and her hands were shaking. "What is wrong?" Thomas asked. "Nothing," Emma said quickly. "I am just tired." Thomas took the dish towel from her hands. "Sit down," he said gently. Emma sat at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. "I do not know how to do this," she said. "I do not know how to take care of everyone. Mom made it look so easy, but it is not easy at all." Thomas sat across from her. "You are not supposed to take care of everyone. That is my job now." "But you do not know how either," Emma said, then immediately looked sorry for saying it. Thomas laughed, which surprised her. "You are absolutely right. I do not know how, but that does not mean you have to do it by yourself." Thomas explained to Emma that families work best when everyone contributes something, but no one person carries all the responsibility. Emma was good at organizing and planning. Jake was good with mechanical things. Sophie was good at reminding them all to be gentle with each other, and Thomas was learning to be good at making decisions and taking care of the big problems. "But what if I mess up?" Emma asked. "Then you mess up," Thomas said, "and we figure out how to fix it together. That is what families do." From that night on, Emma started to relax a little. She still helped with household tasks, but she also joined the school drama club and made a new friend named Sarah. She started smiling more and worrying less. The biggest test of their growing family bond came in early October. Thomas woke up one morning with severe chest pain. The stress of the past month, combined with his heart condition, had finally caught up with him. Emma found him sitting on the edge of his bed, unable to catch his breath. "We are taking you to the hospital," Emma said firmly. "I am fine," Thomas protested, but even he could hear how weak his voice sounded. "You are not fine," Jake said from the doorway. "And we are not going to lose you too." At the hospital, the doctor explained that Thomas had had a mild heart attack. Not enough to cause permanent damage, but serious enough that he needed to start taking better care of himself. He needed medication, a better diet, and less stress. Also, the doctor said, "You need to quit being stubborn about asking for help. You have 3 children depending on you now." The children stayed at the hospital all day, taking turns sitting by Thomas's bed. Sophie held his hand and told him stories. Jake brought him water and adjusted his pillow. Emma handled all the paperwork and talked to the doctors. "We were so scared," Emma said when the doctor said Thomas could go home the next day. "I was scared too," Thomas admitted. "Not of dying, but of leaving you 3 alone again." Sophie looked up from her coloring book. "You are not going to leave us, are you, Pa?" Thomas looked at these 3 children who had become his whole world in just a few weeks. Emma, with her strength and determination. Jake with his curiosity and mechanical gifts. Sophie with her gentle heart and growing trust. "No, sweetheart," Thomas said. "I am not going anywhere. We are a family now, and families stick together." That night, when they got home from the hospital, Jake made dinner for everyone. It was just scrambled eggs and toast, but he was proud to help. Emma made sure Thomas took his new medications. Sophie brought him her wooden rabbit to hold while he rested. As Thomas lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of his family getting ready for sleep, he realized something important had happened. They were not just 4 people living in the same house anymore. They had become a real family. They took care of each other. They worried about each other. They loved each other. Thomas thought about Mary and Susan. For the first time in 20 years, thinking about them did not make his chest hurt with sadness. Instead, He felt like they would be proud of him. He had found a way to love again. He had found a way to be needed and useful. The children had started calling him Pa without even thinking about it, and Thomas discovered that he liked the sound of it. Winter was coming to Nebraska, and with it came the hardest part of healing. Thomas had learned that you could stay busy during the day and forget about sadness for a while, but at night, when the house was quiet and there was nothing to do but think, the pain always came back. The children were struggling too. They had been so busy adjusting to their new life that they had not had time to really grieve for their mother. Now, as the weather turned cold and the days grew short, all of them felt the weight of what they had lost. It started with Sophie having nightmares. She would wake up crying and calling for her mama. Emma or Thomas would go to comfort her, but nothing seemed to help. During the day, Sophie was her usual sweet self, but every night brought the same bad dreams. Jake began acting angry about everything. He snapped at Emma when she asked him to help with chores. He argued with Thomas about how to fix farm equipment. He got in trouble at school for fighting with another boy. When Thomas asked what was wrong, Jake just said he was fine and walked away. Emma tried to hold everyone together, but Thomas could see the strain on her face. She was trying to be strong for Sophie and Jake while dealing with her own sadness. She stopped talking about school activities. She stopped laughing at Jake's jokes. She moved through each day like she was carrying a heavy load. Thomas recognized the signs because he had lived them himself for 20 years. They were all stuck in their grief, unable to move forward or back. The turning point came on a cold November evening. Thomas was in the kitchen making hot chocolate when he heard Sophie crying upstairs. But this time, instead of the usual nightmare crying, she was having what sounded like a complete breakdown. Her sobs were so deep and heartbroken that Thomas dropped his spoon and ran upstairs. He found Sophie in Emma's room. Both girls were on Emma's bed, and both were crying. Jake stood in the doorway looking scared and helpless. "What happened?" Thomas asked. Emma looked up with tears streaming down her face. "Sophie found Mom's recipe box. We were looking for the cookie recipe Mom always made for Thanksgiving, and Sophie just broke down." Thomas sat on the edge of the bed. Sophie was holding a small wooden box that was painted with flowers. Clara must have kept her favorite recipes in it. "I miss Mama so much," Sophie sobbed. "I do not want to make cookies without her. Nothing tastes right without Mama." Jake came into the room and sat on the floor. "I miss her too," he said quietly, "and I miss Dad. I know you guys do too, but sometimes it feels like I am the only one who remembers him." Emma wiped her eyes. "I remember both of them every day, but it hurts too much to talk about them. It is easier to just keep busy and try not to think about it." Thomas looked at these three children who were trying so hard to be brave. He understood exactly how they felt. After Mary and Susan died, he had done the same thing. He had run away to his mountain and tried to bury his feelings so deep that they could never hurt him again. But that had not worked. The pain had followed him everywhere for 20 years. It was only now, sitting with these children who needed him, that Thomas was beginning to understand something important. "Can I tell you something?" Thomas said. "About my wife and daughter?" The children looked surprised. Thomas had never talked about Mary and Susan except to mention that they had died. "Their names were Mary and Susan," Thomas began. "Mary had brown hair like Emma's, and she always smelled like the flowers she grew in our garden. Susan was 7 years old when she died, the same age as Sophie is now." Thomas took a deep breath. This was the hardest thing he had done since leaving his mountain. "After they died, I thought the best thing to do was forget about them. I moved to the mountain so I would not have to see anything that reminded me of them. I threw away most of their pictures. I never talked about them to anyone. I thought if I could just stop remembering, the pain would go away." "Did it work?" Jake asked. "No," Thomas said. "It made everything worse. I spent 20 years being lonely and sad because I was afraid to remember the people I loved most." Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Inside was a small photograph that he had carried for 20 years but never looked at. It showed Mary and Susan at a park, both smiling at the camera. Mary was pushing Susan on a swing. "This is them," Thomas said, showing the picture to the children. Sophie stopped crying and looked at the photo. Susan looks like me, she said. Yes, she does, Thomas said. And Mary was beautiful and kind, just like your mother was. Emma took the photo and studied it carefully. You carried this for 20 years? Every day, Thomas said. But I never looked at it because it made me too sad. I thought remembering them would make me weak, but I was wrong. Forgetting them is what made me weak. Thomas put his arm around Sophie. Your mother and father do not want you to forget them. They want you to remember all the good times. They want you to tell stories about them. They want you to make their favorite foods and celebrate their birthdays and keep them alive in your hearts. Jake moved closer. But it hurts to remember. Yes, it does, Thomas said. But it is a good kind of hurt. It means you love them very much. And love is never something to hide from or be ashamed of. Over the next few weeks, the family began talking more openly about their losses. Emma told stories about her father teaching her to drive the tractor. Jake remembered camping trips and fishing expeditions. Sophie talked about helping her mother bake cookies and plant flowers. Thomas shared memories of Mary's laugh and Susan's love of animals. He told them about the little house with the white fence and the garden Mary kept. He explained how Susan used to follow him around the yard, asking a million questions about everything. They decided to make Thanksgiving special by cooking all of Clara and Robert's favorite foods. Emma found the cookie recipe in Clara's box, and they spent an entire afternoon making dozens of sugar cookies shaped like turkeys and pumpkins. They were not perfect like Clara's cookies, but they tasted like love and memories. On Thanksgiving Day, they set 2 extra places at the table, one for Clara and one for Robert. It was Sophie's idea. She said her parents should be part of their first Thanksgiving together, even if they could not be there in person. Thomas also set a place for Mary and Susan. They would have liked you 3 very much, he told the children. After dinner, they all went to the cemetery to visit Clara and Robert's graves. Thomas had never been to a cemetery since Mary and Susan's funeral 20 years ago. He was nervous about going, but the children needed to see their parents' graves and Thomas needed to face his fears. The cemetery was peaceful and quiet. Clara and Robert were buried side by side under an old oak tree. Someone had planted flowers around their headstones, probably neighbors who still missed them. Emma brought fresh flowers from the garden. Jake brought a small wooden cross he had, made in shop class. Sophie brought one of her sugar cookies for her mama. Thomas stood back and watched the children talk to their parents' graves. They told them about the farm and school and their new life with Pa Thomas. They promised to take care of each other and make their parents proud. When it was Thomas's turn, he knelt down by Clara's headstone. Thank you, he said quietly. Thank you for trusting me with your children. They are the best gift anyone has ever given me. I promise I will take care of them. On the way home, Thomas made a detour. He had something he needed to do while he had the courage. They drove to Montana. It took 2 days with stops to rest and eat. The children had never seen mountains before, and they were amazed by how big and beautiful they were. Thomas's mountain looked smaller than he remembered. His cabin was still there, covered with snow and looking lonely. But it did not feel like home anymore. Home was back in Nebraska with 3 children who needed him. They drove to the cemetery in town, where Mary and Susan were buried. Thomas had not been there since the funeral. Their graves were covered with snow, but Thomas brushed it away so the children could read the headstones. Mary McKenna, beloved wife and mother. Susan McKenna, our little angel. Thomas knelt down and placed Mary and Susan's photograph against Mary's headstone. I want you to meet my new family, he said. His voice was shaky, but he kept talking. This is Emma. She is strong and smart like you were, Mary. This is Jake. He loves machines and has the biggest heart. And this is Sophie. She has your gentle spirit, Susan. The children stood quietly while Thomas talked to his wife and daughter. He told them about the farm and the children's bravery, and how they had saved him from dying alone. I will always love you both, Thomas said, but I am not going to hide from life anymore. These children need me to be strong and happy. They need me to show them that love does not end when people die. It just changes shape. Sophie took Thomas's hand. Are Mary and Susan with my mama and daddy now? She asked. I think so, Thomas said. I think they are all together, watching over us and making sure we take care of each other. On the drive back to Nebraska, the family was quiet for a long time. But it was a peaceful quiet, not a sad one. They had faced their past together. They had honored the people they had lost. And they had promised to keep their memories alive while building a new future. That night, Sophie did not have nightmares. Jake helped Emma with the dishes without being asked. Emma smiled while she helped Sophie with her bath. Spring came early to Nebraska that year. By March, the snow had melted and the fields were ready for planting. Thomas and the children had made it through their first winter together, and they were stronger for it. The farm was slowly getting back on its feet. With help from neighbor Frank Henderson and other local farmers, Thomas had learned the basics of growing corn and wheat. Jake's mechanical skills had saved them hundreds of dollars in repair costs. Emma had proven to be a natural at managing the farm's business side, keeping track of expenses and planning for the future. But it was Sophie who surprised everyone the most. The shy little girl had developed a special gift with animals. It started when she found a sick chicken in the coop one morning. Instead of being afraid, Sophie carefully picked up the chicken and brought it to Thomas. This one is sad, Sophie said. She needs help. Thomas looked at the chicken. It did look sick. Its feathers were dull, and it was not moving much. I do not know much about chickens, Thomas admitted. Can we call the animal doctor? Sophie asked. The veterinarian, Dr. Martinez, came out to the farm that afternoon. She was impressed with how gentle Sophie was with the animals. This little one has natural instincts, Dr. Martinez told Thomas. She can tell when an animal is not feeling well just by looking at it. Under Dr. Martinez's guidance, Sophie nursed the sick chicken back to health. Soon she was taking care of all the chickens, making sure they had fresh water and good food. The chickens seemed to trust her in a way they did not trust anyone else. Word of Sophie's gift with animals spread through the farming community. Way too so. Frank Henderson's cow had trouble giving birth. He asked if Sophie could help. The 7-year-old girl stood calmly next to the large cow, talking to her in a soft voice, while Dr. Martinez delivered a healthy calf. That child has the touch, Frank told Thomas afterward. Animals know when someone has a kind heart. Sophie's success with the chickens gave Emma an idea. The farm needed more sources of income, and fresh eggs were always in demand in town. Emma suggested they expand the chicken operation and start an egg business. We could sell eggs at the farmer's market, Emma said, and maybe to some of the restaurants in town. Thomas was hesitant at first. They were still learning how to manage what they had. But Emma had done her research. She had talked to other egg producers and calculated the costs and potential profits. Her plan was solid. They started small with 50 chickens in a new coop that Jake built with help from neighbor kids. Sophie took charge of caring for the chickens, and they responded by laying more eggs than anyone expected. The chickens were healthy and happy, and their eggs were some of the best in the county. Emma set up a stand at the Norfolk Farmers Market every Saturday morning. She was a natural salesperson, friendly and knowledgeable about their products. Within a month, they had regular customers who specifically looked for Sophie's eggs. Jake, meanwhile, had become the unofficial mechanic for half the farms in the area. Word had gotten out about his skill with engines, and neighbors started bringing their broken equipment to the farm for repair. Thomas supervised, but Jake did most of the work. That boy has magic hands, said Mrs. Patterson, who was not related to the children despite sharing their last name. He fixed my old mower that 3 other mechanics said was hopeless. Jake charged fair prices for his work, and every dollar he earned went into the farm's bank account. He was proud to be contributing to the family's financial success. By summer, things were looking much better. The egg business was thriving. Jake's repair work brought in steady extra income. The crops were growing well. They had paid down some of their debt to the bank, though they still owed a lot of money. Then came news that changed everything. One hot July morning, a man in an expensive suit knocked on their door. He introduced himself as Mr. Davidson from Midwest Development Corporation. "I represent a company that is very interested in your property," Mr. Davidson said. "We would like to make you an offer to buy your farm." The offer was for twice what the farm was worth, enough money to pay off all their debts and have plenty left over to start a new life anywhere they wanted. "Think about it," Mr. Davidson said. "You could move to a nice house in town. The children could go to better schools. You would never have to worry about money again." After Mr. Davidson left, the family sat around the kitchen table discussing the offer. It was tempting. The money would solve all their financial problems. They could live comfortably without the constant worry about making ends meet. "What would happen to the farm?" Sophie asked. "They would probably tear everything down and build houses," Emma said. "That is what development companies usually do." Jake looked upset. "But this is our home. Mom and Dad are buried here." "They are buried in the cemetery," Emma corrected gently. "But I know what you mean. This place has all our memories." Thomas listened to the children talk. He could see that they were torn. Part of them was attracted to the security the money would provide, but another part of them loved the farm and did not want to leave. "What do you think, Pa?" Emma asked. Thomas looked around the kitchen where they had shared so many meals and conversations. Through the window he could see Sophie's chickens pecking in the yard. In the distance was the barn where Jake worked on engines every afternoon. This had become home in a way Thomas had never expected. "I think," Thomas said slowly, "that we should talk to the bank first, find out exactly how much we owe and how long we have to pay it back." The next day, Thomas and Emma drove to town to meet with the bank manager, Mr. Foster. The news was not good. They owed $48,000, and the bank wanted the loan paid off within 2 years. "I am sorry, Thomas," Mr. Foster said. "I know you folks are working hard, but the farm was in trouble even before Clara died. We have been patient, but we cannot wait forever." On the drive home, Emma was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "Maybe we should take the development company's offer. At least we would have the money to start over somewhere else." Thomas understood her thinking. Emma was 17 now, almost an adult. She was worried about practical things like paying bills and securing their future. But Thomas was thinking about other things too. "Let me ask you something," Thomas said. "Are you happy here?" Emma considered the question. "Yes," she said. "I am happier than I have been since Mom and Dad died. We all are." "Then let us try everything we can think of before we give up," Thomas said. That evening, the family held a meeting. Thomas explained the situation honestly. They needed to find a way to make more money from the farm or they would lose it within 2 years. "I have an idea," Jake said. "What if we expanded my repair business? I could fix equipment for farms all over the county, not just our neighbors. And we could get more chickens," Sophie added. "Dr. Martinez said I could learn to take care of other animals too. Maybe we could board horses or cows for people who do not have enough land." Emma's eyes lit up. "We could turn part of the farm into an agricultural education center. Schools could bring kids here to learn about farming. City families could come for weekend visits to see where their food comes from." Thomas was amazed by the children's creativity and determination. They were not ready to give up on their home. Over the next few weeks, the whole community seemed to rally around them. Frank Henderson organized a barn raising to build a new equipment shed for Jake's expanding repair business. Dr. Martinez helped Sophie set up a small veterinary clinic in one of the outbuildings. The local high school agriculture teacher worked with Emma to develop educational programs. Even people from town got involved. The Methodist church ladies organized a bake sale to raise money for new chicken coops. The high school football team volunteered to paint the barn. Local businesses donated materials and equipment. Thomas was overwhelmed by the generosity of people who barely knew him. "Why is everyone helping us?" he asked Frank Henderson. "Because you are good people trying to do right by those kids," Frank replied. "And because Clara and Robert were part of this community. When we help you, we are honoring their memory." By the end of summer, the farm was busier than it had ever been. Jake's repair shop had customers from 3 counties. Sophie was caring for chickens, goats, 2 horses, and a small herd of cattle that belonged to various neighbors. Emma's educational programs were booked solid through the fall. The agricultural education program was Emma's greatest success. Every weekend, families from Omaha and Lincoln brought their children to the farm to learn about rural life. The kids loved collecting eggs with Sophie, helping Jake fix small engines, and learning about crops from Thomas. "This is what farming used to be like," said one father as he watched his son feed chickens with Sophie, "before everything became so mechanized and distant. You are giving these city kids something they cannot get anywhere else." In September, Mr. Davidson returned with an even higher offer for the farm. This time, the family did not even need to discuss it. "Thank you," Thomas told the developer, "but we are not interested in selling." "Are you sure?" "This is a very generous offer," Mr. Davidson said. Emma stepped forward. "This is our home," she said firmly. "It is not for sale at any price." After Mr. Davidson left, Thomas looked at the 3 children who had changed his life so completely. Emma was about to start her senior year of high school. 2 years had passed since Thomas McKenna first received that yellow envelope on his mountain. Now, on a warm May morning, he stood in his best shirt and tie, watching Emma walk across the stage to receive her high school diploma. She was the valedictorian of her class, something that made Thomas proud enough to burst. Emma had grown into a confident young woman. At 18, she had the poise and wisdom of someone much older, but she had also learned to laugh and dream like the teenager she was. Her graduation speech was about second chances and the importance of family, and there was not a dry eye in the auditorium when she finished. After the ceremony, Emma's friend Sarah ran up to congratulate her. "I cannot believe you are staying here for college," Sarah said. "You could go anywhere with grades like yours." Emma smiled and looked at Thomas, Jake, and Sophie, who were waiting for her with a bouquet of flowers from Sophie's garden. "I am going exactly where I belong," she said. Emma had been accepted to several universities, but she chose to attend the University of Nebraska's agriculture program while living at home. She wanted to learn modern farming techniques and business management so she could help expand their operation even more. Jake, now 14, had become something of a legend in the county. His repair business was so successful that Thomas had built him a proper workshop behind the barn. Jake had 3 part-time employees, all older than him, who helped with the simpler repairs while he handled the complex engine work that other mechanics could not figure out. "That boy is going to be rich before he is 20, Frank Henderson often said. But Jake was not interested in getting rich. He loved working with his hands and solving mechanical puzzles. He had decided he wanted to study engineering in college, but like Emma, he planned to stay close to home. Sophie, now 9, had become the unofficial animal expert for the entire region. Dr. Martinez had taken her on as a special assistant, and Sophie spent her afternoons after school helping at the veterinary clinic. She could diagnose sick animals better than most adults and had a way of calming frightened creatures that amazed everyone who saw it. The farm itself had been transformed beyond recognition. What started as a struggling corn and wheat operation had become a thriving agricultural center. Sophie's chickens now numbered in the hundreds, and their eggs were sold in grocery stores throughout eastern Nebraska. Jake's repair shop served customers from 4 counties. Emma's educational programs brought in thousands of visitors every year. But the biggest change was in Thomas himself. The man who had once been ready to die alone on a mountain was now deeply connected to his community. He served on the county school board and volunteered at the local food bank. He had joined the Methodist Church, mostly because Emma sang in the choir and he loved to hear her voice. He even played checkers with the other older men at the coffee shop on Saturday mornings. Thomas's health had improved dramatically. Regular visits to Dr. Patterson, no relation to the children despite the shared name, and proper medication had stabilized his heart condition. More importantly, having a reason to stay healthy had motivated him to take better care of himself. "Love is the best medicine," Dr. Patterson often told him. "Having people who need you and whom you need in return does more good than all the pills in my office." The farm's financial situation had improved too. They had paid off most of their debt to the bank, and Mr. Foster now treated them as valued customers rather than risky borrowers. The various businesses they had developed brought in enough income to support the family comfortably, with money left over to save for the children's college educations. But success had not spoiled them. The children still did their chores without complaining. Emma still helped with cooking and laundry. Jake still fixed neighbors' equipment for fair prices. Sophie still treated every animal, from the tiniest chick to the largest cow, with gentle respect. They had not forgotten where they came from or what they had almost lost. One evening in June, as they sat around the dinner table sharing stories about their day, Sophie made an announcement. Mrs. Garcia at school asked if we would take in another kid, she said. A foster kid whose family cannot take care of him anymore. Thomas looked at Emma and Jake. The three of them had been discussing this possibility for months. The farm was successful enough now to support another family member, and they had so much love to give. What do you think? Thomas asked. Are we ready to expand our family again? Emma nodded immediately. If we can help someone the way we were helped, we should do it. Jake agreed. This place saved us. Maybe it can save someone else too. The foster child was a 10-year-old boy named David whose parents had died in a car accident. Like the Patterson children, he was scared and sad and did not trust adults very much. But unlike Emma, Jake, and Sophie, David had no relatives willing to take him in. When David arrived at the farm with his single suitcase and frightened eyes, Thomas saw himself as he had been 2 years ago, lost and alone and convinced that life held nothing good for him. Sophie immediately took David under her wing, showing him the animals and explaining how everything worked on the farm. Jake offered to teach him about engines and tools. Emma made his favorite foods and helped him get settled in the room they had prepared for him. You are safe now, Thomas told David on his first night. We are going to take care of you. It took time, just as it had with Emma, Jake, and Sophie. David had to learn to trust again. He had to believe that this family would not abandon him the way life had abandoned him before. But slowly, with patience and love, David began to heal. By the end of summer, David was calling Thomas Pa just like the other children. He had found his place in the family and his role on the farm. David loved working in Sophie's garden, and he had a natural gift for growing vegetables. The local newspaper did a feature story about their family. From hermit to father of 4, the Thomas McKenna story. The reporter was amazed by how much their lives had changed. 2 years ago I was dying alone, Thomas told the reporter. Now I have 4 children, a successful farm, and more friends than I know what to do with. Sometimes life surprises you in the best possible way. The story attracted attention from other media outlets. Television crews came to film segments about their agricultural education programs. Magazine writers interviewed Emma about young women in farming. Jake was featured in a trade publication as the teenage mechanic who can fix anything, but the attention did not change them. They remained focused on what mattered most, taking care of each other and their community. One autumn evening, as Thomas was updating his will with the lawyer, Mr. Peterson made an observation. You know, Thomas, when I first met you 2 years ago, I was not sure this arrangement would work. You seemed like a man who had given up on life, but look at you now. You have built something remarkable here. Thomas thought about what the lawyer had said. He had built something remarkable, but not by himself. Emma had contributed her intelligence and leadership. Jake had provided his mechanical skills and optimism. Sophie had shared her gift with animals and her gentle heart. Even David, in just a few months, had added his own special qualities to their family. Most importantly, Clara had started it all by trusting him with her children. Mary and Susan, in their own way, had prepared him to love again by teaching him what it meant to be part of a family. On Christmas morning, Thomas sat in his favorite chair watching his 4 children open presents. Emma had knitted scarves for everyone. Jake had built wooden toys for Sophie and David. Sophie had made cookies shaped like all their farm animals. David had drawn pictures of the family for everyone's bedroom walls. Thomas's gift to the children was a surprise he had been planning for months. He had officially adopted all 4 of them. Emma, Jake, Sophie, and David were now legally his children, not just his wards. They would always be McKenna's, no matter what happened. Does this mean we cannot get rid of you now? Jake asked with a grin. You are stuck with me forever, Thomas replied. As they sat together by the Christmas tree, Thomas reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, he had been a bitter, lonely man waiting to die. Now he was surrounded by children who loved him, in a home filled with laughter and purpose. He thought about all the people who had helped make this possible. Sheriff Johnson, who had delivered that life-changing letter. Mr. Peterson, who had guided them through the legal process. Dr. Martinez, who had nurtured Sophie's gift with animals. Frank Henderson, and all the neighbors who had welcomed them into the community. Most of all, he thought about Clara. His cousin had somehow known, even across the decades of separation, that he was the right person to raise her children. She had seen something in him that he had not seen in himself, the capacity to love again. Thomas had learned that family is not just about blood relations. It is about people who choose to care for each other, who support each other through good times and bad, who create a home where everyone belongs. Emma was now a college sophomore studying agricultural business. Jake was the most sought-after young mechanic in the region. Sophie was already being recruited by veterinary programs even though she was only 11. David had blossomed into a confident boy who wanted to study horticulture and help feed the world. All 4 children were thriving,